What is up guys, Blue Spooky here with a new daily video. All of the stories therein are new to this channel as well as I can keep track of. So if you guys end up enjoying this video and you guys are enjoying these daily videos, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. It really helps the video to do well and ensures I can keep making these videos daily for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts you'd like to share in the comments, either about the stories or the video itself, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about doing this is reading your guys' comments, even if I may not always be able to respond to them. Either way, I'm gonna let you guys enjoy the next hour or so of true scary stories, and I'll see you again at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. This is back when I was a high school freshman. I remember that during this time, I would get a ride to school with my older brother. We both played sports, but different ones. One day, a couple months into the school year, we both had practice. Mine was early after school, and my brother's was a bit later. When my practice got done that day, it was around 5 p.m. My brother's practice was still going on. All my teammates had left except for one. One of my good friends on the team, Jack, was in a similar situation. His brother was also still practicing. We sat around and were talking outside the gym areas for a while. At some point, though, we got quite bored and decided to walk around. School had been done for hours now, so at this point practically everyone was gone, and the place was almost completely empty. We just talked and walked around random hallways, wandering around randomly. We were both freshmen and still fairly new to the school. We knew most of the place pretty well though. I remember after walking around for a while, we found this staircase that neither of us knew about. It was in an older wing of the school. There were doors in front of the stairway, but one of the doors was currently open. We were both curious, so we walked inside and started going down the stairs. They led to what I have to guess was the basement of the school. I wasn't even aware the school had a basement. At the time, I was thinking it probably wasn't used for anything except for storage. When we got down further, it was really dark. Most of the lights were currently off, but we found one switch. A few lights to the hallway turned on. It was basically just one hallway with a few rooms in it. We walked down and were just kinda looking around. I think we were both just surprised that we even had a basement in our school. We were talking to each other, looking at various things, when toward the end of the hallway we heard a door open. This really startled us, because we had no idea that anybody else was down here. I mean, all the lights had been off, and this place didn't really seem like it had been in use for anything. The next thing I knew, this random guy walked out from a room into the hallway. We both didn't know who this guy was. We didn't recognize him, and he very clearly did not work for the school. He was wearing nothing that would indicate he was a custodian either. The guy had really short hair and was wearing a dirty t-shirt and jeans. He looked over at us and didn't say anything. After us both staring at one another for a few moments, the man started moving in our direction. The way he was moving was very aggressive. As he was approaching, he told us to come over to him. We both had a bad feeling about this, though. We turned around and quickly ran back up the stairs. After we made it to the top, we both went away from the hallway. The man did not attempt to come upstairs after us and seemed to have remained in the basement. We continued to walk far away. For the next 20 minutes or so, we walked up and down random empty hallways of the school and talked about what just happened. Soon enough, we got curious and decided to head back, not go into the basement per se, but just see into the hallway. When we returned, both of the doors leading inside were shut. I actually tried to open one, but it wouldn't budge at all. seemed to have been locked. We walked away and headed back over toward the gym area. We waited there until our brothers were done with practice. After that happened, I wondered who that guy was and what he was doing down there. I never saw that guy again around the school. I wasn't aware of the basement area being in any sort of use either during my entire time there. We never did go back down there again. I worked at a Walmart store when I was younger and in high school. This was one of the first jobs I ever had, and I didn't have a car yet or a consistent means of transportation. Most of the time, I would hitch a ride from my parents or older brother. My parents worked odd hours, and my brother also had a job and played football as well, so I never really knew who was going to be driving me. Usually, it all worked out well, though. One time, I worked a night shift until around 9 p.m. or something like that. I remember that we lived like 10 minutes from the Walmart, and when I got off, I texted my mom. She was not able to come and get me, so I texted my dad and older brother as well. Unfortunately, I did not hear back from them. During that time, I was inside the Walmart in the break room still, sitting down with another coworker who I was sort of friends with named Rachel. She asked me if I was off, knowing that I got done around 9 p.m. or so. I told her yes, but I was waiting for my brother or dad to text me back. Rachel had to leave the break room to go back to work, but said bye or something along those lines. Now, there was just one other person in the break room with me. It was this guy named Michael who was about 5 years older than me. I really didn't know much about him, other than that he worked at the Walmart as well. I think he stocked shelves or something. He'd never really spoken to me or crossed paths with me at all. I had seen him here and there. Suddenly, he walked over to me, though, and asked if I needed a ride home. He said he had just gotten off as well, and that he was leaving now. I didn't know him that well, so I was still a little hesitant. I said no thanks, but Michael insisted it would be no trouble at all, and he wanted to help out his coworker. I figured he must just be trying to be nice. I looked down at my phone and saw I still had not received any replies yet. I was tired and just wanted to leave, so eventually I said yes. I offered to pay Michael gas money, but he said no. I followed him out into the parking lot, and we walked over to his car. It was a really old, rusty, and beat-up-looking pickup truck. We both got inside, and I gave Michael my address. He said that he knew where that was, and it wasn't very far away from his place. After that, we left. We started to talk during the ride and got to know each other a little bit, asking basic questions and stuff. I wasn't paying that great attention to the road, but I did notice that Michael turned before we would have come to my street. I didn't say anything at first, even though I probably should have. He drove down this road a little while, and I wasn't really sure what he was doing. I was hoping that maybe he was just taking a different way of getting to my home. We were in the general area, but not at all on the correct street. Michael pulled off of that street and into the parking lot of an apartment complex. He proceeded to drive up to it and park in one of the spaces. I asked him where we were, and he said this was his apartment. I told him he was supposed to drive me home, not go to his place. He insisted that I may as well come inside and hang out with him for a while. I started to get angry. I told him that I didn't want to. I demanded that he drive me home right now, and he just flat out said no. I told Michael that I really had to get home. It was late, and I had school the next morning. Michael told me to stay the night at his place. Obviously, I said no. Michael then said, "Well, too bad for you, I guess." He walked into his apartment and left me there. I was now miles from home, in some random apartment parking lot. I couldn't believe Michael had just done that to me. I guess it was good he didn't try to force me to go inside with him at least. I called my brother, who still hadn't texted me back. Luckily, he actually picked up the phone. He said he had just gotten off work and could come and get me. I walked to the end of the apartment complex parking lot and waited for an uncomfortable 10 minutes. My brother showed up, and I was able to get home safely that night. After that, I didn't bother to report Michael to work or anything. I didn't want to make a big deal out of the situation. I figured I would just try and stay as far away from him as I could and never talk to him again. That strategy was going well at first, but only for about a week or so. One night, I got off work kind of late again. This time, I had my dad coming to pick me up, but I had to wait for him to arrive. I walked outside of the Walmart and stood around on the sidewalk. Things were pretty quiet around the area. The parking lot was completely silent. At this time, maybe 5 minutes into waiting, I noticed a truck driving to the front. It was Michael's truck. He stopped right in front of me and rolled down the window. He asked me if I needed a ride. I said no. He said he would give me a ride to my place this time. I said no again and added that my dad was already on his way. Michael didn't answer. He rolled his window back up but did not drive away like I thought he would. Instead, I heard his driver's door open and saw him start to walk around the vehicle in my direction. I walked right back inside the Walmart and didn't stop when I arrived inside. I went down a few random aisles until I realized that Michael was not behind me. Then I went straight to the manager and reported the whole thing. By the time my dad arrived, Michael was already gone. I got my ride home with him, and everything turned out fine. The next time I worked a few days later, I found out Michael had been fired. I was glad, and luckily after that I never saw him again. I'm retired now, but for a couple of years in my 50s, I worked a night shift in a mall. I was a custodian and would come in and clean once the mall had closed for the night. Most of my nights were spent tidying up the food court areas, as well as taking care of the restrooms. One night, I remember I was sweeping the floor in the food court area when I heard a fit of coughing coming from somewhere up ahead of me. I looked around the dimly lit food court space, but I didn't see anyone there. A couple of times throughout my years working there, I had discovered somebody or a group of people who had hidden away in the mall and were doing some sort of challenge of staying there overnight. I didn't see anyone though, and I heard no further noises, so I just continued cleaning. If someone really wanted to stay in the mall that badly overnight, I guess I'd see them eventually, unless they stayed put in whatever spot they were in the entire time. About 15 minutes passed by, and I was wiping off the tables now. Suddenly, a loud series of bangs startled me. I looked up and saw that a whole table and all the chairs surrounding it had been knocked over onto the ground. I walked over to the items on the ground, which happened to be near the edge of the food court area. There was still no one to be seen anywhere. I ventured down away from the food court a bit, to see if I could catch anyone running away or hiding perhaps. I was just about to turn around and go back when I heard water start running inside the woman's bathroom. All the bathrooms in the mall had sinks that were motion detected. Someone had to be inside there right now, and I had a feeling it was going to be the culprit I was looking for from the food court. The sink was still running as I slowly and quietly entered the bathroom. As I turned the corner, though, the water abruptly stopped running, and there was nobody anywhere to be seen. I checked every stall and still nothing. I chalked it up to a faulty sensor on the sink and decided I'd put in a work order for maintenance to fix it. Oddly enough, though, as I turned to walk away from the bathroom, I heard the sink turn on once more. I walked back to the food court very confused and also a little bit spooked as well. I went about the rest of my night as usual, finishing my cleaning duties. A couple days later, I received an email from maintenance that there had been nothing wrong with the sink sensor at all, and it was functioning perfectly normally. From then on, at least once a week, I would hear the water turn on from the sink in that bathroom. For the rest of the time I worked at that mall, I just kind of accepted that I wasn't alone there and tried to stay away from that area. I never had any interaction with whoever this was, and there were no further incidents really. No more mysterious knocking over of tables or chairs or coughing in the food court area. Thankfully, the spirit or intruder or homeless person or whatever they were decided to stay in the women's bathroom area and never really tried to do anything to me personally. On the 4th of July, back when I was 17 years old, this story took place. During this time, I was in high school and still living with my parents. Our house was in this neighborhood kind of near a park. It was quite a dense neighborhood, with lots of other houses clustered nearby each other. Each year, on the 4th, there would be a huge firework display at the park near where we lived. Sometimes we would go down there directly, and other times we would just sit and watch the fireworks from our yard. They were still pretty easy to see from there. The entire neighborhood would always be extremely busy during this time. Many people from all over the city would come to watch these fireworks, and just about everybody who lived in the neighborhood would either go to the park or go outside to watch them. There would be a lot of cars parked on the sides of the streets, and a big traffic jam in the area. A few of my friends from school were going down to the park for the fireworks, and I was going to be joining them. Some of them lived in the area, and some would be driving over. I think it would be a total of about 5 of us that night. At around 8 p.m. or so, I left my house to meet up with my friends at the park. The fireworks were not supposed to start until 9-something, but we wanted to hang out for a while. I saw there were already a lot of cars parked there, and people were mingling about on the sidewalks. I made my way to the park, which took about 10 minutes. When I arrived, it was really crowded. The park was big, but it had more than just the fireworks to show. There were various food trucks and many places to get drinks and things like that. Many people were enjoying the night, and I was able to find my friends. We met up, and the fireworks took place at the normal time. We sat in the grass and watched them. When they were over, we talked for a bit and started to go our separate ways. My house was not in the same direction that all my other friends were going, so I left through the side of the park that connected to my neighborhood. I started walking back all by myself. The park was still really crowded when I left at first. I went onto the sidewalks, which were really busy as well, but once I'd made it a block away, it cleared up significantly. I still had a ways to go, though. As I continued to go on my own way, I noticed there was this guy who appeared to be following me. I first noticed him by complete happenstance when I was crossing the street. I looked behind me because someone had shot off a firework in their front yard, and as I looked in that direction, I noticed a man about 40 feet behind me or so. By this time, there was not really anyone else on the sidewalk besides me and him. I didn't initially think anything of it, but as I kept going and made multiple turns, the man followed me throughout all of them, even crossing the street to be on the same side as me. I could still hear the man's footsteps behind me. I was starting to get nervous. He followed me the entire 10-minute walk back, and soon my house was in sight. When I arrived at my place and was just out front of it, I made a quick veer off to the right. I ran right up to the front step without looking back and got my keys out. I was able to quickly unlock the door and go inside. Once I was in, I locked the door behind me and looked back. When I looked out the window, I saw the man was now standing out in our front yard. I saw him walk back onto the sidewalk. It appeared as though he'd maybe been following me to the front door, and I'd made it in just in time. I'm really glad that I was able to make it inside so fast. I figured the man would be gone now, and that would be that. My parents were in the living room watching TV. I was inside for about 30 minutes when there was suddenly a knock at the front door. That was pretty strange with it being 11 o'clock at night. I went over and looked out the window, and it was the very same man who had followed me home standing there. I went to the living room and told my parents what happened. My dad walked over to the front door, and after the man knocked again, my dad yelled at him that he was going to call the police. The man immediately turned and sprinted away out the front step and quickly went back to the sidewalk. After that, he never returned. The memory of this event still gives me creeps when I think about it. I don't know what that man's plans were for that night, but I sure am glad he didn't get to enact them. My friend Derek and I rent a house together. He's a pretty big partier though, and often stays out really late, or even sleeps over at other places. A lot of nights because of this, I have the place all to myself. This was one of those said nights where Derek was out at the club or whatever. Having the night alone, I brought out a couple cans of beer to our front porch and sat on the swinging bench we had set up. It was nice weather out, and with it being nearly midnight, most people were already in bed. The neighborhood was pretty quiet. After being out for a little less than an hour, though, a person came walking down the street in front of the houses. He looked like a large guy, had a sweatshirt on with a hood over his head, but something was off about the way he was walking. He was extremely stiff, like only his legs were moving, and his entire upper half of his body was not. When he got up to the part of the road my house was in front of, he immediately stopped and looked over at me. I waited a few moments for him to say something, but he made no attempt to say anything at all. He just stood there right in the middle of the road in front of my house and looked at me. "Hey buddy, you need something?" He stayed quiet for a moment, then started walking up my driveway. I stood up from the bench and yelled at him to leave, but once I realized he was not going to stop, I ran inside and locked the door behind me. I watched out the peephole as the guy came right up to the door. He waited for another moment before pulling out something from underneath his sweatshirt. It was hard to see from the small view I had, but it looked like maybe a hammer or a crowbar. Once I saw that, I knew what was likely about to happen. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom, dialing 911 and trying to be quiet. I could hear the wood splintering off the door downstairs. As I pleaded with the operator for help, there was a loud thud and silence. The broken door swaying on its hinges was the only sound I could hear. I waited anxiously, assuming I'd hear the man's footsteps approaching the bedroom door at any moment, but seconds turned to minutes until I heard a cop car pull into my driveway. I thought about running down to meet the officers, but the operator told me through the phone to stay where I was and wait for the cops to come to me. I sat back down, and 30 seconds later, I heard one of the officers walking up the stairs, followed by them shouting and firing off a taser. Turned out the man had been standing right outside the bedroom door, just waiting for me to open it. He was arrested, apparently very drunk. I have no clue who he even was, or why he did what he did. As far as the officers have told me, the guy refused to say why he was walking down the road or what he was even doing there. All I know is that if I had opened that door to go meet with the cops, it would have been the last thing I ever did. I'm a man who works at a mid-sized grocery store. I do 10-hour shifts and work mostly overnights. At the time, our store was having some staffing issues, which made pretty much every department understaffed and overworked. Overnight stalking was no exception. I had one guy that would help me 5 nights a week, but that was it. Other than me and this guy, nobody else was around to help. This was on that guy's day off, so it was only me working. I got in at around 10 o'clock and was all alone. By 10:15, after running some numbers in the office, I started pulling out loads of boxes to the aisles and started unpacking and stocking the shelves. Even though I had no help on this night, I still had to get everything done quickly. I was working hard and quickly as I could. I didn't even stop for a break or anything. All of a sudden, though, this tapping sound echoed throughout the store. I stopped and listened in, hearing it happen again and again. It sounded just like someone tapping on a window or something. I looked at my watch for the first time since I'd started working and saw it was around 2 a.m. or so. The time had really flown by. There was no reason anyone should be here this late. I walked down the aisle into the front, where I saw someone standing outside the store. He was leaning into the window with his face pressed up against the glass, trying to look inside. He spotted me as I walked up and stared at me. When I was just on the other side of him, I asked the man what he wanted. The man looked like he was homeless. He told me to open the door right now. He had a completely dead straight face, no smile or anything. I said we were currently closed and that he couldn't be here right now. I turned to walk away, but the man immediately began banging on the window. It was a harsh banging, and he was clearly enraged. It looked like he was pounding so hard that he was hurting his fist on the glass. Thinking this guy was crazy, I told him I'd call the police if he didn't leave right now. I started pulling my phone out to show the man I was serious. Only then did he step away from the window. He still had that angry look as he walked away, out into the parking lot. Seeing him leave, I put my phone away and got back to work. We get plenty of crazy customers around here, so I didn't dwell on it too much. Again, I had to focus on getting all my work done first. I was only able to get a small cart of boxes stocked, maybe 15 minutes later, when a sudden sound echoed through the store once more. It sounded like something metal snapping or scraping against something. I quickly dropped what I was doing and ran to the front. Nobody was at the windows, so I went to the entrance door. It was one of those revolving glass doors, which uses a bolt lock on the top to keep it from opening when closed. Right away, I saw the bolt was missing. Not even just unlocked, the entire bolt was gone. I pressed my hand on the door, and it glided around completely, allowing anyone to get inside. I could feel my face turn white as I realized what this meant. I knew I needed to call the police right now. I turned around to go to the front office, but instantly met face to face with the man from before. He was only a few feet away from me now, still having that enraged stare. I didn't hesitate to run out of the revolving door into the night, hearing the guy following close behind me. As I ran into the parking lot, an old van came speeding up to the front and nearly hit me. I just kept running until I got to my car. When I rushed in, I noticed the guy was now not chasing me anymore, and the van was speeding out of the parking lot. I called the police and spent the next couple of hours explaining exactly what happened. It wasn't until the next day that we got security footage of the man breaking inside, but it wasn't the best image quality. We can say almost for sure that they were trying to get me into their van, but we have no way of knowing why. I'm sure if I'd not been as quick, though, I probably would have never been seen again. I recently went to the movies with my wife. My wife and I tend to go every once a month or two, since usually at least one thing will come out in that time span that catches our attention. This past time, we went to see a new horror movie that was coming out. It had really good reviews and was supposed to be a real good, scary movie. The showing we ended up going to was pretty packed up. It had just come out and was also a Friday night, so that was to be expected. I ended up having to be seated next to somebody because of how packed the theater was. The man who was seated next to me appeared to be at the theater all by himself, but other than that, nothing seemed too odd about him. Just a regular guy. The movie got going, and so far, so good. The movie had started going, and so far it was as good as everyone had made it out to be. The man next to me had gotten up at some point, but I was so invested in what was going on the screen that I didn't even know how long he'd been gone for. When he came back, I saw he was breathing quite heavily, and I glanced over and saw he was completely dripping with sweat. We made eye contact briefly, and I resumed watching the movie. Once the movie ended, we made our way out of the side doors of the theater and started going towards our car. We had gotten pretty far down the lot and were close to approaching our vehicle when I saw that the man who had been sitting next to me earlier was walking behind us toward the same area. Must have parked near us, I thought. I glanced around, however, and we were the only car parked in that section of the lot. There wasn't a single vehicle anywhere near us. I peeked back towards the man once again. It seemed he had followed us out of the side exit. After I looked forward and back to him once more, I didn't see him anywhere, which was quite odd. My wife and I entered our car and were surprised to see the glove box was open, which had definitely not been left open earlier. Inside the glove box was a note written on an old yellow piece of paper. It didn't have any words on it, just some strange-looking symbol I didn't recognize. We were frightened and didn't see anyone else around. As we pulled out of the parking lot, though, and went to leave, I saw the man who had been sitting next to me in the theater, hiding at the edge of the woods and staring at us as we drove out of the lot. I had a sneaking suspicion that the man had broken into the car or perhaps stolen my keys somehow earlier. As we left, there was this unsettling feeling in the air. It made me sure he was behind the paper in the glove box. I never found out what the symbol on that paper meant, and I never did see the man again. It was a pretty uncomfortable experience that spooked my wife and I for quite a while, though. I went to the movies a couple of years ago with a small group of friends. We got the luxury of having the theater to ourselves, as no one else had showed up to the showing that night. We decided to sit in the top row of the theater right in the middle, so we could have the best view of things. While we walked up the stairs towards our seats, the movie hadn't quite started yet. The theater was still dimly lit as the previews played. When we walked down our row in the dim light, I thought I could see some movement through the window of a small room in the back of the theater, the part where the film gets shown through. I know that in modern-day movie theaters, they don't really usually need a person to sit back there through the whole movie, like they did in the past. I figured maybe it was a worker just checking on something before the film started playing. My seat ended up being right below that window, which was about a foot or two above my head. About 15 minutes into the movie, my friends and I began to hear a soft tapping sound coming from right behind us, coming from the film room. It sounded like someone was tapping on the window right above our heads. The tapping continued long enough for us to start getting a little angry about it and want to check out what was going on. We got up out of our seats and stood up on them so we could get a look into the room and the tapping noise. It had abruptly stopped while we were getting up onto our seats, but we still wanted to check it out. My friends and I pressed our faces up against the glass of the film room. On the other side, it was completely dark, and we didn't see anything back there. Maybe the tapping had simply been a part of the machinery that was playing the movie. Either way, whatever it was had already stopped, so we tried to go back to watching the movie. 5 to 10 minutes later, though, the tapping started once again. This time, it was much louder and far more rapid. It sounded for sure like a person tapping the window behind us. This time, we got up quickly onto our chairs to see what was going on in that room. I pressed my face to the glass and fell backwards off my chair in surprise. A woman's face was staring right back at me on the other side. We were annoyed that this woman was disturbing our movie and acting so weird behind us in the film room. We went to the front desk to complain. At this point, we thought it was a worker back there, employed by the movie theater. However, when we got to the front desk, they told us that no workers were in that room behind us. The two workers in front said they were the only people there tonight. Puzzled, we told them there was 100% a woman in the film room behind us who had been tapping on the window glass and watching us. We led the workers to the theater to show them, but when they checked the film room, nobody was there. My friends and I were scared at this point, realizing that the entire time, some random woman had been right behind us. Thankfully, we got our refunds for the movie, but we didn't want to stay any longer in that theater. During college, I took a girl to a drive-in movie theater once as a date. The movie showing was slotted for 9 o'clock, so I picked her up from her place at around 8 p.m. We made the drive out to the theater. I'd never been to this place before, but from everything I had seen online, they all said good things about it. I was kind of excited. The theater was farm-themed, so the watching area was surrounded by tall corn, and there were hay bales and tractors all around, enhancing the feeling of being on a farm. We arrived at the outdoor theater, and it was already really packed, with only a couple of spots being left. We ended up being directed to a spot on the edge of the clearing, near the corn area. It was in a row close to the middle, so we weren't too far from the screen. We set up our blankets and pillows in the backseat of my pickup truck and waited for the movie to start. At some point during the movie, I needed to use the restroom and decided I would try and hold it in. However, towards the end of the movie, I really couldn't take it anymore. I just had to relieve myself. The bathrooms at this theater weren't anywhere near where my truck was parked, so I decided I'd have to pee in the cornfield we parked next to. I hopped out of the bed of the truck, venturing 5 or so feet out into the cornfield. I didn't want nearby cars to be able to see me doing my business. I had drunk a lot of liquid before and during the movie, so it was one of those times where it took a solid minute. With the amount of time that I was going to be spending peeing, I just sort of looked around aimlessly. As I stared down a corn row, I saw a pair of eyes reflecting in my direction, a good distance away. Must have been an animal of some kind, but it was odd that the eyes weren't moving. The animal wasn't making any movements at all, and the eyes never glanced away in a different direction. I finished up my business and got back into the truck at the end of the movie. The movie finished a while later, and I packed up the blankets and pillows. My date was already seated in the front of the truck as I was packing up. While folding a blanket, I noticed a pair of eyes again in the cornfield, this time pretty close to the edge. Once again, the eyes did not move and continued to stare at me. I had never seen an animal behaving this way. I was curious to see what type of animal it could be. I was guessing some sort of predator. When I was pulling away in the truck, I backed up in such a way that my headlight shined over where I had last seen the eyes. Well, needless to say, my date and I were completely shocked to see that in the far range of my headlights, there was this gigantic wolf walking back into the corn with its back turned towards us. I had been guessing it would be a fox or something, not a fully grown wild wolf. It was surprising to me that I didn't see the rest of the pack around. I know that they usually travel together. We watched as the wolf disappeared into the darkness of the corn and out of the range of my headlights. It was certainly a chilling thought that I had been peeing out there all alone, right next to a wolf of that size. It was clearly eyeing me for some reason. When I was about 19 or 20, my very best friend in the whole world was dating this guy. He was really cute, funny, and very sweet. I stayed with her at her apartment a lot back then, and he used to always come over and hang out. He lived with his great-grandmother, who apparently was super strict. Even though he was 18, she gave him a curfew, and if he was late, she would lock him out or call the law on him. He always had to be home by at least 10 p.m. Anyways, one night I was at her house and we were drinking and playing cards and stuff. He came running through the door at 9 p.m., saying he had just gotten into a fight. We didn't really think anything of it, because he wasn't exactly a golden boy, and it wasn't all that surprising. After 12 a.m. rolled around, though, we were all a bit confused. "Hey man, your grandma's letting you stay out this late?" He ended up telling us a story about how she had fallen asleep and locked him out for the night. Again, we thought. We didn't really think much of it. It happened all the time, really. Later on the next day, I ended up going home. My friend called me later that night, though, crying her eyes out and panicking, telling me to look on Jail Tracker. I got on there and looked, and was surprised to see her boyfriend's face. Underneath his mugshot, it said murder. I was so shocked. Who had he killed? I was just there talking to him. Turns out, when he came and busted through the door, he had just mangled his grandmother to death with a hammer. He sat there and drank with us, played cards with us, and acted like nothing had happened. After everyone had left, he ended up telling my friend exactly what he had done. She acted like she was going to run off with him. She went into her room and acted like she was packing her bags up to go, but she snuck into the bathroom and called the police. It was really scary and traumatizing for all of us, but especially her. And I think he ended up getting sentenced to 50 years or something like that because of the sheer brutality of what he did. He tried to escape about 4 years after his sentencing, which only added even more time. I doubt I'll ever be seeing him again. My wife and I like to take yearly vacations to different places. It's our way of taking a break from regular everyday life, as well as getting to spend some quality time together. This year, we had a cabin booked in Washington State. It was far out and described online as being very quiet and peaceful, away from many other places or people. Most of our life is in crowded cities, so this sounded great for us. When we flew in, we walked to a grocery store to pick up all the things that we needed. Then we took a taxi out to the cabin. We didn't rent a vehicle because we knew we'd only be there for 3 days. We wanted to spend all 3 of them at the cabin relaxing, and if we changed our minds or needed anything else, we could always just order an Uber or something. The taxi ride took just over an hour from the town proper that we'd landed in. Most of the drive was between huge mountain ranges and tree-covered landscapes. It was really a beautiful sight, and got both of us excited for our stay. At around 7 p.m., we arrived at the cabin. We were completely alone in the middle of the forest. Even the driveway leading up to it wasn't much more than some tire tracks in the dirt. We got out and paid the taxi driver, then brought our stuff inside the cabin. The cabin itself was quite small. There was the main floor that had the kitchen and living room, and a ladder leading up to the loft area that had the bed in it. The bed area in the loft was short, though. You literally had to crawl into bed. Anyway, we unpacked all the groceries and made a very quick dinner. We were tired from the flight. We opened a bottle of wine to settle in for the night and lit up the fireplace. We chatted about how we were looking forward to the next few days. It was around 11 p.m. at this point. As we talked, we both suddenly heard something outside. Someone was walking in the grass near the cabin. It was loud, too, like they were really close by. My wife looked nervous, so I tried to put on a brave face and told her everything would be fine. I got up and looked out the window to try and see what was going on. It wasn't until then that I realized just how dark it had gotten outside. I looked around, seeing nothing but large trees everywhere and pitch black darkness. I told her I didn't see anyone outside. I went over to the front door and opened it. Stepping out onto the porch and turning on the outdoor lights, all I could really see out there was a small portion of the driveway, but I didn't see anyone in the forest. It was very calm and quiet, so if they were still wandering around, I felt like I would have been able to hear them. I went back inside and asked my wife if she'd heard the footsteps anymore. She said the sound didn't seem to fade out though. It just stopped suddenly from somewhere behind the cabin. My brave act was starting to fall through. I told her to go up to the loft and stay quiet while I figured out what was going on. I went around and checked all the windows again, not seeing anything. I went back to the front door. I was preparing myself to go back outside when a sudden thump shook the cabin. I looked at my wife, who was looking up at the ceiling. Someone was on the roof. I stayed inside and called the police, going over lengthy directions on how to get to our place. Over the course of the hour that we had to wait, we could hear footsteps walking across the top of the roof. About 45 minutes into the wait, though, we heard their boots impact the ground, followed by them calmly walking away. I looked out the window once more, just to catch the outline of a person disappearing into the forest. The police took our report and gave us a ride into town, where we spent the rest of our vacation. What that person was doing miles away from civilization in the middle of the forest is terrifying, seeing as they were likely waiting for us to either go to bed or go outside. We're just thankful we got out of there before anything else could have happened. I'm an only child and grew up in a small town. My parents were hard-working and often struggled to pay the bills. They usually worked a lot of overtime or even had multiple jobs. Because of this, I was left home alone pretty frequently. I was 14 at the time, and this night my mom and dad were both working closing shifts. That meant I was home all by myself after school until 10 or 11 p.m. To keep myself busy, I'd usually watch TV or go for walks in the woods behind our house. After getting home from school and having a snack, I went outside. I started walking along my regular path while the sun was still out. It was a 2.5-mile trail through the woods that almost never had anyone else walking on it. Strangely though, about a mile in this time, I saw a guy on the trail up ahead. He was sitting with his back up against a tree, wearing a dark blue jacket, and had a red baseball cap tilted downward and covering his eyes and most of his face. From the way he was slumped over, it almost looked like he was sleeping or passed out. I continued walking, trying to quietly pass by him. As I got just a couple feet away, though, his head instantly snapped up and he locked eyes with me. His eyes had dark circles and were bright red. He had this disturbing frown like he was upset or something. As I passed by, he started standing up, and getting a strange feeling about him, I began walking faster, basically jogging the rest of the trail and back home. I didn't see the man attempt to follow me, but I locked all the doors just in case he had. Again, I was only 14, and even though I was used to being home alone, I still got scared pretty easily. I stayed inside and checked the windows one last time before trying to distract myself by watching TV. Only a few minutes after turning it on, though, I heard a voice at the back door. I paused the TV and listened in, hearing a man call out multiple times, repeating the word hello. I stood up and looked down the main hallway. That same guy from before with the red cap and blue jacket was standing at the back door, jamming his face into it. He was trying to look inside. I quickly went back around the corner, but he must have seen me. He immediately stopped calling out and instead began trying to force the door open. I just froze up in the middle of the living room, listening to the door jostle back and forth against the lock. After several attempts, though, he finally left. I called my parents and they phoned the police, but he was never found, having been followed home. And then the guy trying to break in, though, I can only imagine what he was trying to do to me. This was about 15 years ago. I was 19 and studying abroad in a country in Southeast Asia. The study abroad program was very small, think 6 to 7 students. It was also loosely structured and we had a ton of freedom. I had been traveling the summer before the program started and arrived a week earlier than all the other students. They had us staying in a small home near the program's center in a busy neighborhood. The house was also rented to locals during the summer, but typically only to students from this program during the school year. Again, I had moved into the house early, and it was empty aside from myself. The owners of the property were pretty traditional and strict, and made clear we were not allowed to have any visitors, especially men. At one point during my first day there, I heard a knocking at the door. I looked out from an upstairs window. It was a bald local man that didn't look like anyone from my school program. They knocked for about 10 minutes, but I decided to pretend I wasn't there. Eventually, he left. The day this happened was also during Ramadan. There's typically a curfew in this city, but because of Ramadan, many people were out late eating. I met up with a local couchsurfing group and ended up hitting it off with a cute German tourist. Eventually, we made a plan for him to sneak into my house with me, which we thought would be easy because it was so late. When we arrived, I saw a couple of cars outside the home, so I had him wait at the far end of the block so I could make sure the coast was clear. What I walked up to, though, was extremely confusing. There was a big white Jeep in front of the home, and men with large guns were standing around it. There was also a small gray sedan, with the doors open, and a man sitting inside the driver's seat. He looked just like the man that had been knocking at the door earlier. The housekeeper, a sweet middle-aged man, was also outside with the men, and seemed very upset. I can't remember exactly what was said, but I remember the man in the car repeatedly saying my full name, which I do not go by. He was saying something like, "Come on, Cassandra, everything's okay, just get in the car." I only go by Cassie and never introduce myself as Cassandra. I had no idea who this person even was, but he was extremely friendly to me, like he was there to help me. I knew obviously that he was not. The men with the guns began asking me if I knew him. I said no repeatedly, but I got the weird feeling that they all wanted me to say yes, like it would be solving some sort of problem for them. They were not pointing the guns at me, but it was still extremely frightening, especially because I already felt like I had nowhere to go, and I was hiding my German visitor. The man in the sedan got out and approached me, and tried to herd me into his car. At this point, the men with the guns grabbed the housekeeper, and were being really rough with him. Some neighbors were watching nearby now, and I was confused as to why no one was helping. Finally, a neighbor approached and yelled something in the local language to the group. He then told me in English to get inside immediately. Everyone left, and the men with the guns took the housekeeper with them. I got inside and locked the door. At that point, I started crying, but still felt a little bit in shock. Everything felt quiet very suddenly, in comparison to all the commotion. A few minutes later, I heard a light knocking on the door and someone calling my name. I realized it was the German guy from earlier. I ended up leaving with him and going back to his hotel instead. Turned out to be a really nice guy and helped me to calm down from the whole ordeal. When I got back to the house the next day, everything seemed to be mostly normal. The housekeeper was there, and though we didn't speak the same language, he seemed very despondent. What I learned later was that the white Jeep was an unmarked police vehicle, and the men with guns were local police. The man in the sedan had been trying to get into the house, and someone had called the police. I still have no idea what the man wanted or how he even knew my full name. It seemed somehow the housekeeper ended up getting blamed in the confusion. He was apparently beaten at the police station before the same neighbor that helped me got a group from the neighborhood together to go get him. By far the most troubling part, though, was when I called my advisor from school that day to let her know what happened. She was a really nice person, but as soon as we got on the phone, she had a really strict tone with me. She said something along the lines of, "Cassie, we already told you you may absolutely not have male visitors. Even if you ask permission, it's not okay." I was confused. Apparently, a woman had called and left a message on her phone yesterday that sounded just like me, saying a man would be coming to the house later and the housekeeper should let him in. The woman had even called herself Cassandra. That part still gives me a stomachache when I think about it. My advisor believed me when I told her it wasn't me, but there didn't seem to be much recourse aside from asking the neighborhood to look out for the man and not let him into the home. I'm still not sure how all this happened, or what would have happened if the man had gotten inside or I had gotten into his car. My best guess is that a student who used to live in that house saw from our school's private Facebook group that I would be arriving early, and for some reason gave that information to the man and called my advisor posing as me. Facebook is one of the few places where I still go under Cassandra instead of Cassie. I don't know how else they would have known to contact my advisor. Either way, I still have no idea what they would have done with me, and I'm extremely grateful that people stepped in to help and didn't leave me alone with that man. I work as an asbestos surveyor. I regularly have to go through entire derelict buildings. One time, I had to do a survey of an old nunnery. The foundations dated back over 300 years, I believe. I was down in the basement when I discovered a well with a ladder going all the way down, probably a 30-feet descent. I descended all the way down, only to find a tiny door at the bottom. I realized immediately this obviously was not a well hole. The door led to this tiny room with no lighting. Inside the room was a large cross similar to a crucifix with restraints on it. I can only guess it was used for some kind of religious exorcism type shit. There were scratches on all the walls, and the building's owner had no idea the room was even there. As I observed the room more, I felt an almighty chill go over me, and I heard something slam. Needless to say, I bolted out of there like a rabbit being chased by a ferret, and I never went back. Northwest of Los Angeles, there's an old abandoned missile silo. The hatches used to open about 10 years ago when I first went. One day, a buddy and I went down into the hatch to go exploring. The first scary thing we encountered were tons of rattlesnakes. Eventually, though, we found a stairwell and continued down into the pitch-black darkness with our dinky little flashlights. I think we got about 2 stories down when we came across a large corridor. We kept moving forward, and from just around the corner, a ghost white figure popped out. We immediately froze. Our beams of light revealed to us the figure's legs. We raised our lights and eventually saw the face of this figure. It was a mannequin. At that point, we just said fuck this, and we got the hell out of there. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in the comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, There will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.